grills in my mouth double as a freeze. The grills in my mouth double as a freeze. The grills in my mouth double as a freeze. The grills in my mouth double as a.
All right, guys, welcome back. Sorry, we've been gone for a bit. We both, me and Giancarlo, he's not here. He couldn't make it today, so it's just me and you. But we got Elias, the Spartan Theodorou, former UFC fighter. He recently fought in Colorado Combat FC, decision win over Brian Baker. But you fought the likes of Thiago Santos, Sam Alvey, Derek Brunson. We actually had Sam Alvey on a while ago.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, so how you been doing, man?
I've been doing great since my last fight, like you mentioned, in Colorado for Colorado Combat Club. Kind of been just training and looking to do what I've been doing for the last little bit and focusing on my fight to win win the fight against the stigma of medical cannabis. So my actual last two fights, I was both a fighter and co-promoter.
Okay.
Both were age gated. So in British Columbia, it was 19 plus, and in Colorado, it was 21 plus, and it was completely funded by weed, mushrooms, and gambling. My three favorite things.
That's awesome. That sounds dope.
Yeah, literally. For both of them, I got the approval for what's called the therapeutic use exemption, where I was allowed to use actual dope cannabis throughout my training and set precedent as the first sanctioned cannabis athlete in the world.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. I knew I was gonna ask you to get into that. So obviously I'm assuming you've been using marijuana most of your life. Obviously you didn't just start using it whenever it was legal in Canada, right?
Well, much like many people, I dabbled a little bit in high school, tried it here and there. But when I became a professional athlete, I thought they're mutually exclusive. And it wasn't until I saw that my coach, who is a cannabis patient as well, was using it for pain management and how it helped him, one. And two, how whenever we would travel and he was forced to, try opioids or painkillers because it was illegal in that location. Prime example being Thailand, for instance. We went to Thailand and we were there for 3-4 weeks. And by the two-week mark, I just saw how much of a bad reaction he had to it. It just like wrecked his stomach and whatnot. So when my own condition of bilateral neuropathy, it's essentially nerve damage of my upper extremities. I also have arthritis and whatnot. And as you can imagine, punching and kicking and getting tossed on your head a lot.
Doesn't help.
You get bumps and bruises. Yeah. And you're constantly sore. I kind of knew about cannabis, again, on the medical side, because my experience before that was more or less, recreational, as a teenager, yada, yada, yada. So seeing his one usage and then the detriment that it did when he wasn't able to use it, I knew that cannabis was a better option for me, potentially a better option. And so when my own condition and my own injury started adding up, I reached out to my doctor and we realized and we determined that cannabis was a better option for me. Fast track when the UFC partnered with USADA, cannabis was considered a prohibited substance. So that's when I actually applied for, as I mentioned, a therapeutic use exemption in the UFC. Was the first person to do that. They acknowledged my condition of bilateral neuropathy, but they essentially, because they didn't want to really do it, they just kept on trying to throw pills at me. So the irony, of course, being USADA, which is basically primarily funded by the U.S. government, which still considers cannabis a Schedule I drug, which means it has no medical property. They were doing a campaign about not, about the potential issues of cannabis addiction, or not cannabis addiction, opioid addiction, painkiller addiction, and all those detriments. But yet they were telling me to do opioids. They're telling me to do painkillers, and they basically, by the end of it, they wanted me to start doing antidepressants. And I'm not depressed. And to the point where my doctor basically, almost like nervously laughed and would say, like, we haven't suggested this since like the 80s or like the early 90s. You know what I mean? He goes, it's very outdated. And that's what kind of this whole, prohibition, if you will, in professional sports of cannabis. It's outdated, and that's what I've been, determined to fight. So when I left the UFC, I basically created my own organization with Rise Fighting the Stigma, where I again validated and was approved for a therapeutic use exemption. March 13th is when I competed, 2021, and I was able to get the TKO against another former UFC fighter, Matt Dwyer. And then from there, leveraged that precedent to Colorado and did the same thing against another game opponent in Brian Baker. And again, created precedent in both areas where I was able to medicate with cannabis and set precedent not only for myself, but for other athletes to do so, even to the point where now in Colorado, they're looking to actually remove the ban of cannabis and just kind of look at it, just as they do with other substances. Just you can't be impaired the day of the fight. So, they don't test you for alcohol. They don't test you for cocaine. They don't test you for a lot of things. They just want to make sure that you're not impaired before you step into the cage.
Yeah, that's true. Like it's so weird, like especially here in Canada. It's been a while now, like what, 4 or 5 years since marijuana went from decriminalized to legal. Although that is legal, like you said, that there's still such a big stigma. You can say, oh, it's legal, it's okay, but I feel like when you get to the higher levels, like the USADAs of the world, like a lot of normal people's even like workplaces where they work at, there's still, like, even when it comes to doctors, pharmaceutical, all those big type companies, they still veer away from marijuana. So like people say the stigma's gone, but like you're saying, what you're doing right now is fighting the stigma when it comes to like these big companies, right? Like especially in sports. Like I guess the most recent high level example I can think of marijuana affecting was Sha'Carri Richardson, the runner for the Olympics. That's the most correct me if I'm wrong, that's the most high level, most recent example that's easy recognizable for a lot of people. Or even like UFC terms, like Nick Diaz, how long did he get suspended for? Like something crazy.
Well, originally, that's a great example because when he fought Anderson Silva, both of them got flagged for performance-enhancing drugs, right?
Yeah.
Anderson Silva got busted for actual steroids,
Yeah.
actual, banned substances, and Nick Diaz had some cannabis in his system. Anderson got 18 months. Nick Diaz got a lifetime ban.
I know.
And then because of the outcry, it obviously became 5 years, then 18 months again when it was all said and done. But again, it shows you that stigma compared to actual performance-enhancing drugs. Cannabis is considered still worse.
Yeah, I think was that the time they was claiming they were dick pills, right? Isn't that what he was?
Yeah.
Isn't that the time he kept saying they were?
It's no problem.
It's no problem.
It's no problem.
Yeah, it's crazy. What do you think of, like in terms of USADA? They've been implemented for a while. Not to talk too much about other fighters, but obviously, you had your Belfords and you had your Ubereems and Ubereems and your Vitor Belfords. It was like straight up the Hulk. And so obviously it's helped things in that way, I can say, but also like they recently, within the last year or two, they said that they're not going to publish people's cases until it's confirmed, something like that. Do you know?
Yeah, well, no, that makes sense because again, especially when you're talking about, it's not again, it's a weird thing because like there's a lot of tainted supplements, especially the U.S. supplement company industry. It's the Wild West. So it's unlike in Canada where it even though it's a supplement, it still has some kind of attachment to vitamins and like there's still a regulatory component to it in Canada more so than the U.S. Where the U.S. It's like the Wild West, like I mentioned. So like for instance, they can have what's called a proprietary blend, which means 30% of our magic stuff. So like that's our magical ingredients. We don't know what's in there. It's 30% proprietary blend, which could be anything. And then a lot of these, especially in the States, a lot of these supplement companies, they're fronts for the actual steroids and stuff like that they do. So like you'll hear examples like all the time, for instance, like one of the more famous ones, there was a multivitamin company specifically for like old people, and like 10 old people just dropped dead They like turned yellow and dropped dead. And what ended up happening was this company was a front for them making steroids. So like they would make steroids and they would sell us for like ungodly amounts of money on the black market, and then they would use the same facility to run these vitamin companies or these vitamins that I'm talking about. And what would end up happening is essentially contaminate it, and these old people would get steroids that they weren't expecting, and they would turn they would turn yellow, and then like they would get jaundice, and then they would just die. So like, and then what ends up happening is just the way the structure is in the US, that company would just basically go bankrupt. They would just bankrupt that company themselves, and then just pop up a new one. So if you're suing that company, then all of your issues and any repercussions of them being a front for steroids, it's kind of gone.
Yeah, it's a never-ending battle, like in terms of like steroids, not just UFC, just in general, like steroids, performance-enhancing drugs. It's a never-ending battle. It seems no matter the amount of sanctions that are put down on it, like UFC, like there are a lot less busts than there was when you saw it was first implemented. But I'm assuming there's got to be a lot of, I'm not sure how much you know about it, how much you can say about it, but there's got to be a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff about people, getting caught and not it being exposed to the public. Like the last big PED bus was probably TJ Dillashaw, and that's already what two and a half years ago now, because he's back. Like, so do you think there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on between USADA and the fighters if they piss hot, or if something is discovered in their system and it's just not leaked to the public?
Yeah, it's a different process now, but eventually gets if you did do it and they do catch you, then it takes some time, but eventually it does go public. And it's just a case of like, again, some of these gyms and some of these fighters, if they're making enough money, they have a better pharmacist.
Yeah.
They have their own personal pharmacist, right? And it's very much a cat and mouse game, because by the time, like even with the TJ Dillashaw example, what ended up happening was he cleared all of those, and then they tested specifically for something else afterwards, and then that's when they found it, and they went retroactively and looked at the rest of his samples, because they keep your samples for up to like 7 years. And they go back, and like that's what usually it is the case where these companies, these athletes, and who they're backed usually are more advanced, and then USADA catches up later on.
Yeah. So to switch topics a little bit, just really quick, the Canadian MMA scene. You started. Did you start in like when you first started training MMA, fighting pro? Did you start in Canada, or did you go to the States to start fighting?
Yeah, no, I definitely started in Canada. Trained at a small little gym called Cross Gym when I first started. It was illegal in Ontario. So actually, I think the exception to that would be right after I got my degree. My parents, because I got an offer for a job, like a 9 to 5. I'm like, what are you going to do? Like, I literally got my diploma. I said, I'm going to Thailand tomorrow. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to Thailand for 3 months. And I went there and I fought there a couple kickboxing fights or whatever like that. And that's when I knew, like, this is what I want to do. But, when I came back, it was, just in that point where it became legal and sanctioned in Ontario to compete. But obviously there was a lot of people that already kind of, had their spot. They were going to be their first people, right? So I ended up going to Calgary and competing for the Hard Knocks. I was originally supposed to be, kind of like a stepping stone for their local hero, and I beat the living shit out of them. So what's it called? And then from there, that kind of the rest is history, as they say. So I went on like a 10, 13 fight win streak before I, applied for the Ultimate Fighter and then won that. And then obviously from there, I actually went for the camp for the Ultimate Fighter. I actually went back to Thailand to Tiger Muay Thai and trained there. And it was amazing to see kind of like the transition from like when I was there, like 2004 to when I was there in 2014. It was mind blowing. But no, and then from there, I train and travel all over the world. I've had the ability to, train in New York with the Longo Weidman team. I had the ability to go to Florida and train like a whole bunch of gyms down there, California, and Vegas more recently.
Yeah. So in Ontario, like you said, it was illegal for the longest time. It's legal now, sanctioned. There's a whole thing behind it. There's been recently, like since COVID, I say like a year before COVID, but now it's popping up since, not COVID's over, but restrictions are mostly gone, like 99%, I think. Predominantly BTC. I think
Yep.
you were the ring boy once for one of the early BTC events, I think.
A couple of
But
them, yeah, for sure.
yeah, BTC is blowing up now. They got a bunch of I think they got a bunch of UFC fighters that fought in BTC. Jasmine Juzevicius out of Top Team. Not sure you're familiar with her.
Yeah, for sure.
Aaron Jeffries and Bellator out of Top Team as well. What do you like? What do you have to say about the rise of MMA in Canada, more specifically Ontario? And I'm not sure if you know, but more specifically Niagara Top Team, they got a bunch of Bellator guys, UFC guys, pro guys there. They got Michael Mallet, who just sent Mickey Gall into the shadow dimension about 2 or 3 weeks ago, which is crazy. So what do you have to say? Like, how much do you keep in touch still with the Ontario MMA scene?
No, I've been training with Jeffries for better part of 7 years now. Chris Brickett, who's the coach there, great guy, great coach. You mentioned some of the fighters that are under his tutelage. Mixed martial arts and, more broadly speaking in Ontario, in Canada or whatever, ebbs and flows, right? Like you had someone like the rise, like the early years and the rise of someone like GSP, eventually, like, whether it was like the Canada versus Australia that I was a part of, and the great cast and of fighters that were there, kicking ass for quite some time, and then obviously again another rise of someone like Aaron, Jasmine, and there's a whole bunch of other fighters. Josh Hill, who's been in the game for quite some time, and a bunch of other people still in Montreal and obviously BC and Calgary has a great scene too. As with anything, it's ebbs and flows. That's how it kind of goes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more opportunity now, for Canadian guys to bridge into the UFC, just because of how much more like international of a sport it is now. You look at compared to how it was even like 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Like you got a bunch of Asian fighters, a bunch of fighters coming from Africa. Obviously, the rise of Dagestan. There's about 1 million Dagestani wrestlers in UFC now. But yeah, I think like now better than ever is more of a good time for Canadian fighters to bridge over in UFC. There was an opportunity before, like you said, you had the GSPs, you had yourself, you had Rory McDonald, you had
Patrick Cote.
Patrick Cote, Charles Jourdain. There's a bunch of guys that you can name. But yeah, I think it's really easy now. So just to talk a little bit about your UFC career. So like I said, you fought a bunch of guys: Sam Alvey, Thiago Santos, Derek Brunson. I think your losses were only decision losses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're never finished in the UFC. You beat a bunch of guys. So just talk about your experience there. Like when you first got how it changed from when you first got in the UFC with your last fight with Derek Brunson. Like what was just a quick sum up of the journey between those fights? Like what was your experience?
Amazing. Yeah, amazing ride. Obviously, I have the luxury of winning the Ultimate Fighter. It was a lot of hard work, but arriving on the scene in that capacity, and then kind of really cementing the ability to make a career out of mixed martial arts and the fighter's journey. That's what I fell in love with. I fought from Liverpool to to Sydney, Australia, and everywhere in between, and then got to train and travel. Japan, Thailand, like I mentioned, Brazil, all over the States. And then after I would kick someone's ass and win, I would end up, traveling there and any surrounding countries. So, really love the fighter's journey that I was able to have with the UFC. As with anything, there's pros and cons. The ability to, make a living and that fighter's journey and traveling and experiencing the world, both as a fighter and as a person. And then obviously, some of the negatives would be right when I got there, the ability to put your sponsors on your shorts and your shirts and, the banners, that was taken away. So that was a huge negative. But again, I was lucky enough to because I won the Ultimate Fighter. I was a little kind of ahead on the pay grade, and I became a very winning, fighter, as he mentioned, and was able to make a hell of a living from it.
Yeah, I'm looking at I was looking at I'm noticing right now, you're a pretty active fighter. You fought twice in 2021. You didn't fight at all in 2020. I'm assuming, COVID, the restrictions, everything like that. But I'm sure if it didn't exist, you would have fought another 2 times. You fought once 2019, twice in 2018. You fought 3 times 2017, 20. So you're a pretty active fighter. You're fighting consistently 2-3 times a year, aside from COVID, that kind of set you off a little bit. What do you think? What can you attribute that to? Can you attribute that to just like luck of less injuries, not nearly as like threatening injuries, or just consistency, staying training, always ready? What do you contribute that to?
A little bit all of the above, right? I was
Yeah.
lucky enough not to get any major injuries, knock on wood. And then from there, the ability to have the passion to train, and especially even in the regional scene when I was there, never really having too many opponents, falling out.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of guys, right? It is because of injury, but it's sometimes like as a fan, it's frustrating to watch. Like you get your fighters, like obviously the more famous they get, it seems like the less they fight. You know what I mean? It's like the high level guys, like the McGregors, the Poiriers, the John Jones. He hasn't fought a bunch of other issues, but it's good to see when fighters like fight 2-3 times a year, like yourself. Cerrone fought like how many times a year as of until up recently, like what 2-3 times a year, 4 times a year.
Fair.
So it's really good to see fighters. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing to a fighter's career? Do you think it's a bad thing because the more wars, or do you think it's a good thing because you're keeping your body conditioned and you grow with it more gracefully?
I think every fighter is different, and again, every fight is different. Depends on the battles that they've had and whatnot. So I know it's kind of like it's different for everyone.
Yeah, speaking of battles, actually, nice little segue. I keep throwing in segues like that. Is there one fight that you can pick out in your career, inside UFC, outside UFC, that you would say that like that was a fight that tested me the most? Like that was a fight that pushed me my hardest?
I would definitely say the Thiago Santos fight. Again, the proof was in the pudding in regards to how tough he ended up going on afterwards, and the run he's had. And there was just no quitting me. Even though I was able to win the first round, it was kind of like almost like a up in the air draw for the second round, and he pulled away in the third. I at no point did I quit. I ended up getting like 35 stitches in that fight in some capacity, and I ended up pissing blood afterwards. But
Oh Jesus!
yeah, right.
Wait, you actually pissed blood after? That's
Yeah. Oh yeah.
really. That
Yeah.
must be a scary situation. I've heard the saying people pissing blood, but it's never happened to me. I mean, obviously, I've never fought in the UFC and never fought Thiago Santos.
It's never happened since, luckily. So it just showed. It proved to me, one, that because that was my first loss too.
Okay.
So one, that losing isn't everything, and the sun will rise another day, and you'll live to fight another battle. And also the capacity of I'm a real tough son of a bitch, and even when someone like Thiago Santos hits you with everything he's got, I'll just still keep coming.
Yeah, I remember watching that fight. That was a while ago. I was a little bit younger. It was like 2016, 2017, but
give or take 2015.
It was 7 years ago, so I was 12. Yeah, I started watching. Yeah, I remember that was one of my early times watching UFC, and it was just so cool to see a Canadian guy on there because I just started watching like a year in at that point. And it was all like the big names at the time, but the Canadian fighter is really cool to see. It gives you that sense, like hometown, like it's a real genuine feeling when you root for them, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Oh shit, I had a question too. It was a really good question. Oh yeah. So right now, you're 34 years old. Do you have any? So what's your plan from here on out? You're 34. You're still in your prime ages. Even now, I think people's primes are extended a lot longer than they are. You still got a bunch of guys killing it at 34. I mean, 40. Like, you'd love to share. The guy's almost 10 years older than you, and he's light heavyweight champion of the world. Not for too long, my prediction. I don't think. With all due respect to Glover, I think Prochazka's a killer. So what's your short term or long term game plan from here on out in terms of your combat career?
Yeah, well, I'm very much focused on my cannabis, fight. I have another avenue either by the end of this year or the beginning of next. I'll compete in a way that kind of has Olympic implications, and again, just knocking down more barriers of cannabis. Outside of it, I also have like a bunch of different cannabis roles that I've kind of recently added, I guess, to the many hats that I wear. I'm the chief access officer to Leafy Things. We're the #1 cannabis directory in Canada, and we have some of the coolest events this summer. So I'm really looking forward to just having a lot of fun this summer and basically just smoking a lot of weed, talking about weed, and sharing the benefits of weed. And the same thing with my own cannabis brands. that are going to be coming out soon, and they'll be in, stores nationwide. I signed with a recent cannabis company out in California as well, called Game Day. And we got like a huge event that's going down August 26th down there for the World Series of Cannabis. It's going to be like the biggest cannabis event of the year. We got a carnival here in Toronto that we're a part of. It's by the exhibition place, and it's just going to be like, there's not going to be nothing like it. It's the Canada's largest consumption lounge. There's going to be edibles, hookahs, and just a lot of weed. So I'm very much, focused on the business side of things. I put a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears in regards to what I've accomplished, both in the cage and out on the cannabis side. And honestly, I'm reaping the rewards of that. So basically, I'm just going to be training for this year for the most part, and just look to get better. And then once I have all the products and brands and everything kind of like, all my ducks in a row, I'll look to make a run for it for another, another run in where it's inside the cage. And now really utilizing, like I said, one of the negatives when I got to the UFC was the fact that they took away our banner, was the fact that they took away our sponsorable abilities. So I'm really excited to maximize that end of this year, early next.
Yeah, for sure. Quick question before we head out. Don't waste too much of your time. You have UFC 275 Singapore this weekend. Do you have any early, not early, I guess it's today. Do you have any predictions of what's going to happen of the main event, co-main, or are you just going to sit down and watch and enjoy the fun?
A little bit of all of it, right? Like I think obviously Glover, he needs to take it down, take it to the ground. If he's not able to do that, I think it's going to be a rough night for him. He's been exposed in regards to his striking before by younger, hungry fighters. So it just really depends on if he's able to implement his game. If not, it could be a quick reign for him. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I think I was thinking the same thing. Like, Glover obviously had the win over Jan Blachowicz. I think he's got to take it to the ground because Brashaka, like he might be probably one of the top 3 scariest guys in UFC right now, right? People always say Ngannou, but I think Brashaka is the way he fights. Also, which I think it could be a detriment to him, right? Because he's the type of guy just walk forward. He does eat a lot of punches.
Explosive. He's so explosive, and he hits in almost like weird ways, and like he just kind of like steps forward. You know what I mean? Like he's just long. He's probably longer. I don't know the actual dimensions in regards to reach and whatever like that. He just fights longer. Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be a good fight to watch, and then the Weili Zhang, and then the Joanna Jacek fight, I think is gonna be a banger too. If it's anything like the first time. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that's been it. Thanks for joining us, Elias. So yeah, guys, keep a tab on Elias. Follow him on Instagram, Facebook. If you have a YouTube, follow that. And he's doing a lot of things for breaking the stigma of cannabis in the sports world and all around the world. So thanks, guys. Elias, thanks for joining us, man.
My pleasure. You can follow me at Elias Theodorou, plain and simple.
All right, there you go, guys. Give him a follow. iPoke Podcast, guys. We'll see you next week.